Howdy folks. So I got a lot of questions the other day after I did a post about cold weather and hay. I got a lot of questions about blanketing horses, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to do a video about blanketing. So yes, of course you can blanket horses in the cold weather, but I typically do not blanket my horses unless it is cold and wet. Okay, if it is cold and dry, you can see how like Shakespeare here, he has a super thick coat. He's got all this undercoat, okay, and as long as his coat is dry and is able to remain fluffy, he can maintain his thermoregulation. So within a horse's body, they thermoregulate their body temperature, and as long as this hair isn't matted down and cold and wet, and it stays, you know, light and fluffy like this, then they can actually regulate their body temperature, you know, pretty significantly and keep themselves warm. The key to this, though, is they do have to have sustenance. They do have to have forage. Like, I wouldn't want him, any of them, standing out here in, you know, 16, 15, 8, 9 degrees, whatever, without any hay or forage or anything like that, because they need the hay and the forage to run through their system to create energy in order to keep their bodies warm. Now, when it is cold and wet, that is a very, very different situation. Okay, so if tonight it was going to get down to 16 degrees and it was going to be rain, you know, snow, sleet, rain, whatever, obviously it's not going to be rain if it's 16 degrees out. It's going to be some type of frozen precipitation. But even if it were like 32 degrees or 33 or 34 degrees and it was rain, a cold, wet rain can make these horses shiver pretty much faster than anything. So the cold, the wet, and especially wind, because their coats don't have enough time to dry and you know, warm up, be able to warm them up. So in those instances, yes, of course, I will put a blanket on him. Now you can see he just rolled. He's got all this dust and dirt in his coat here, but it's okay because his coat is still very fluffy. I mean, it feels like a super soft rug right now. It's fluffy. It's very warm to the touch. Like when I touch him, I feel his body heat coming out of it. And interestingly enough, snow on a horse actually insulates a horse. So when the snow comes down, sometimes you'll come out here and they'll have snow stacked up that tall on them, and it creates a level of insulation just like an igloo. Whereas if you move that snow off, you'll see steam coming up off of the horse, and that steam is escaping the horse's body. So when there's a layer of nice dry snow, I'm not talking about wet snow, but dry, you know, that dry powdery snow, when there's a layer of that on a horse, it actually helps to insulate them. So Shakespeare is an older horse. He's in his early 20s. So for him, especially when it gets like really, really cold, like tomorrow night, it's supposed to get, we have a wind chill warning, I think, tomorrow night, and it's going to get, I think, to be around like 16 degrees. So I may, even though it's going to be dry, I may throw a blanket on him because the wind, we have a wind advisory, and the wind can, you know, cut into that coat and keep it, you know, make him shiver. So what I will probably do with him is I will throw a blanket on him tomorrow. But with the other horses, the younger ones, like Wyatt and True are right there. I see you and I'm paying attention to you. He really does not want me to stop scratching him. But with Wyatt and True right there, they are half of Shakespeare's age. So their bodies naturally keep them warmer, just because, you know, their metabolisms run a little bit faster. They've got the ability to stay a little bit more warm than I've noticed he has. I have seen him shivering sometimes in the past, especially in rainy conditions. And then, of course, you know, I will put a blanket on him. But you really have to be careful with blanketing horses, because if you blanket a horse who does not need a blanket, you could actually be doing a worse service to that horse. Because when you put a blanket on them, okay, if it is too hot and it's not cold enough and they start to sweat, then what happens is the temperatures are already really, really cold out, and then they sweat underneath this blanket, and then it can't escape and it can't dry. So it's in this wet blanket, and then guess what happens? The moisture in it freezes, and it doesn't have anywhere to go. It doesn't have anywhere to escape. So then you cause this almost trapped system of, you know, the horse has a blanket on, the horse starts to sweat because it's too hot. Then once they sweat, they can't, the sweat has nowhere to go because it's trapped under this liner. Then it becomes wet, then it's cold wet, and then you've literally created like an ice cap around your horse, and you've defeated the entire purpose of trying to keep them warm in the first place. So, and the other thing to be aware of with blanketing is if you blanket, if I started blanketing this horse in late fall, okay, and I just threw a blanket on him every single day, he would not grow a winter coat, okay? His coat naturally would not grow because his body would tell him that he's not cold, so he wouldn't grow a winter coat. So then if one day I missed putting the blanket on him, guess what? He's standing out here, he's shivering, his teeth are chattering because he doesn't have a winter coat. He doesn't have all this thermoregulation automatically built in. So, you know, you have to be super careful when blanketing. You really have to know what you're doing. Other things to worry about with blankets are you have to get the right size blanket for your horse. And typically that means taking a measuring tape, starting it here, taping him all the way back and measuring that distance, and then figuring out how long that blanket should be. You also need to know different weights of blankets. I mean, they have some blankets that have no lining in them. They have some blankets that really are thick with heavy lining, and some that are waterproof, some that aren't, some that are just, you know, little fleece things, some that are, I mean, you have to know all of these things. Blanketing is a very in-depth science, actually. So you really do have to know what you're doing. The other thing to be aware of with blanketing is Shakespeare is in a herd of 8 other horses, okay? And if he were to get that blanket hung up on something out here, like when he lays down to roll, if the blanket isn't fitted correctly under here and he gets his legs hung up, you know, there have been horror stories of horses actually dying because or breaking a leg or whatever because they have been improperly blanketed. So the other thing is, because he's in a herd of 8 other horses, if another horse starts monkeying with his blanket and biting it and pulling on it and stuff like that, they can actually cause the blanket to completely turn on the horse, and it causes a misfitting. And then once again, you know, they can trip on it. They can, you know, accidents can be caused by it. So, you know, in this herd, I mean, when I just had my 3 horses over at the other farm, it was a lot easier to blanket because I only had 3 of them, and I didn't really need to worry about other horses like ripping the blanket off and all that stuff. But here, you know, there's 8 other horses to think about. And when they get to playing, it is something to be mindful of. So all of these things are very important when you are considering blanketing your horse. Before you ever put a blanket on a horse, please do your research. Find out what size you need for the horse. Find out what weight you need for the horse. And by weight, I mean the weight of the blanket. Like if it's just springtime, you know, early fall or early spring, and it's cool but not freezing cold, you may want a lighter weight blanket, you know, that's only got like a filler of, you know, maybe like a 100 filler in it instead of like a 300 filler in it. And they fill it with this like down type of, you know, like this fuzzy stuff that's thick. And so, hi, Shakes. So that is something to consider as well. You need to know what weight of blanket you want for your horse, and you need to consider the environmental you know, conditions for that. I mean, some people have many blankets. They've got just a sheet for the rain, they've got a 100 weight blanket, they have a 200 weight blanket, they have a 300 weight blanket. So that a 100 would be a lighter weight, and then so on and so forth. A 300 weight would be a very thick, heavy-duty blanket that would have the maximum amount of warmth and thickness to it to keep them warm. But, you know, I don't clip my horses. My horses grow a full winter coat, so I don't really have to worry too much about putting like a super heavy blanket on them, just enough to kind of keep their heat in, and I make sure it's waterproof. You are being very fresh today. Shakespeare is sleepy. He just ate his grain, and he's sitting here. He's getting, look at that. He's getting ready to take a nap, but he wants me to, he's waiting for me to brush him. Because usually after they eat, I brush him. I mean, look at him. He's been rolling. He's got mud all over him. So he's like, Mama, shut up and brush me. So anyway, I just wanted to give you guys a quick update on blanketing. It is a very controversial topic in the horse world. So please, people, don't yell at me. I mean, this is just what I do with my horses. You can do whatever the heck you want to do with your horses. Every horse is different. You have to consider all of their circumstances, all of their needs, and their environment as well. What you do for a horse like Shakespeare, who's out here in a herd of nine total, you would not do for like a German sport pony who's up in the barn and who is fully shaved down. Two totally different things. So just something to keep in mind there. Every horse is different. Every situation is different. So just, keep that in mind. And if you do need to blanket a horse for whatever reason, please do your research, talk to your veterinarian, figure out what you need for that particular horse. So, okay, well, I better go brush my boy here because he is waiting, and I will talk to you guys later.